unscripted here. I made an episode about the problems of rage, about how rage can be unhelpful at best, and it's really hard to stick with the thesis of that episode after the results of the election on November 5th. So I am going to focus on what I have been doing in the last week, which is only focusing on whatever can take my mind off of the world and allow me to have any spark of happiness that I can. Honestly, what I've been doing is sitting around and just watching Babymetal videos over and over and over again. I made a segment about my recent kind of love of Babymetal, and I wasn't sure exactly where to fit it. So it kind of fits in with the subcultures as religion idea I was going with, and this is where I'm just going to put it in. My original plan was to talk about being a horror film festival director, and I'll probably talk about that a little more because it's a subculture of its own. But right now, I just need to talk Babymetal. And, I talked about them in the context of religion is kind of a new religion subculture. Even fans of the band will even say, we're kitsune, we're the one. You going down the foxhole, hashtag not a cult. There's some kind of tongue-in-cheek references to just how all-encompassing the love for this Japanese Kawaii band can be. And, listening to their music and watching their videos, it just makes me feel good, and I kind of need that right now. And so, hey, here's a place I can just talk Babymetal in the context of my channel, sort of, but really it's just talking Babymetal and why I think it makes me happy. And I hope that even if you're not familiar with the band or you don't like the band, that you can find some kind of joy in a person expressing and appreciating artists that they love. I think that is powerful when you can relate to someone about the love of an artist, even though your love of the artist might not be the same. It's the emotional impact that you're relating to. And if you do love Babymetal, kitsune up. Anyway, so this is going to be about that. But I wanted to mention something really quickly before I get into this segment that I recorded a while ago and wasn't sure exactly where to put it. I've been watching a few YouTube videos from a Shakespeare professor and confessed Babymetal fanatic named A.J. Hartley. And recently he had a discussion about the Babymetal song called Night Night Burn with another instructor, Puerto Rican instructor, who has some experience in Latin American music and dance, and that's kind of the focus of this instructor. And the instructor's name is Carlos Cruz, and they were talking about Night Night Burn because it has Latin influences. It's a song that I really love. But there's something that the interviewee said that it just kind of knocked me for a loop, which is, and I'll quote him here, "There are versions of metal all over the world. There are approaches and influences, but it could be seen as a common vocabulary of sorts." And that was in the context of a Japanese band doing a Latin-influenced song, and how metal as a genre is a kind of intermediary there that makes a common language that the whole world can kind of get down with. And what blows my mind is that thinking is exactly the thinking I used as a film festival director and a film festival programmer. The only difference is, instead of metal being the common vocabulary, for me it was genres like horror, sci-fi, action that were the common vocabulary worldwide. And so when I very actively would program for or at least partner with a film festival like Film Out San Diego, the LGBTQA plus film festival in San Diego, or Latino Film Festival, or Asian Film Festival, these other kind of specialized film festivals, and I would partner with a genre sidebar like horror, I did it explicitly because I view those genres as a common vocabulary that will help people who might not normally go to those type of festivals experience art from those cultures. And now the same thing is being said about metal as a genre. And I thought that was fascinating. And it's one of the things that maybe I love baby metal for. But that is such a key part of what I was passionate about as a film festival programmer. And it was nice to be faced with that again. Anyway, so this is my Ignore the Election episode. It is my focus on only the piece of art that I've been really loving and why I love it. So I hope you enjoy it, and welcome to the foxhole if you decide to check out Baby Metal songs. I'm going to do one more segment on this show, and it's one I'm a little shy about, and I think I'm shy about it because of this same feeling that I have had historically about wanting to fit in and about being made fun of for one thing or another. I had barely gone to see any bands play when living in San Diego. One of those bands was in 2016, and I went because I was able to get tickets from a friend. But I also went because I had by that point solidified my stance against gatekeeping and what I call now subcultural bullying. If I call the subcultures that I had melted into throughout my life denominations, then this was a moment where two denominations had merged. Rob Zombie is an artist who has thrived in both the music world as well as the horror movie world. Whatever your thoughts on his output in music or in film, there is no question that Rob Zombie has a voice that has a long and storied influence. And I will just use this term again in both denominations. Just as a aside, because I think it's a funny anecdote, one year, it might have been 1994 or 1995, some friends and I had gone to see Gwar in Baltimore. And a friend of mine had got a physical injury from being in the mosh pit, not during any of the bands, but in between the bands when White Zombie was played over the intercom, something I always thought very funny. Anyway, you might be wondering where I'm going with this. In 2016, May of 2016, Rob Zombie had come to the support of a band, and it made internet headlines. Some gatekeeping metalheads had expressed their ire at Rob Zombie at having taken a picture with a Japanese Kawaii metal or cute metal band called Babymetal. This was 2016 again. It was my first time hearing about Babymetal. And although their song Gimme Chocolate had gone viral 2 whole years earlier, I had been at this point pretty myopic in the horror film festival world. Again, not because of any other reason that it's very all-consuming. It's very hard work. In other words, it was just very busy. It was hard to concentrate on anything else. And at that point, too, I had surrounded myself with people who were pretty myopic about being interested in film festival stuff or film stuff, and very few who were interested in music. Yeah, my life had changed at that point. So I only heard about Babymetal because of Rob Zombie coming to their defense. Here's what happened. A picture was posted with Rob Zombie posing with the 3 members of Babymetal, and a bunch of metalheads were angry. Like, Rob, I love you, but blah, 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 whatever. They said it was a bunch of nonsense. Disdain for Rob Zombie having the temerity to take a photograph. And he spoke well of Babymetal, which probably prompted even more rage from the gatekeeping metalheads. But Rob Zombie, unfazed by this, shot back in 2 different ways. One, he praised Babymetal. He said that they were the most energetic band than most of the bands he's seen play in his career. And 2, he shot back at the people making these comments and their kind of keyboard bullying. And so I loved this strong defense for this strange band Babymetal. And although I had not heard of them before, I read that they were still teenagers. And this was important because I felt a certain automatic protectiveness. You know, I have a history as an educator. I've been a teacher. I've worked for the school district, K-12, in San Diego. I now work in higher ed, but that kind of bullying by adults against teenage performers, automatic rage. And I would call them what they were doing, vocal barbs of online zealotry or metalhead zealotry in this case. They were zealots. And again, that's where I see this connection between religion and subculture. But ironically, their hatred made me go out and check out the song Gimme Chocolate on YouTube, which by that point had spent 2 years being viral. And I did really like it, but I loved it as a novelty at the time. It didn't spur me to check out their albums. At that point, 2 of their albums had come out, their first subtitled on Babymetal Records, and then their second one, Metal Resistance, which I think now is a nearly perfect album, if not a perfect album. But I didn't check them out at the time. All I knew was Gimme Chocolate. And it did still feel like a novelty at the time. Babymetal is really the 3 young women, and they clearly had overflowing talent. But my experience for and the appreciation for things like the choreography, it was still, that's a huge part of what they do is their performance, what they offer. My appreciation for it was not yet fully formed or at a point where I would explore them that much farther. But again, that was May 2016. In the same month, I saw an announcement that Babymetal was going to play the Alternative Press Music Awards in July of 2016, and they would not be playing alone. They would be playing some songs with another Rob, this time Rob Halford of the legendary Judas Priest. So I thought at the time, of course, this must be points enough, cred enough, right? They had enough metal points to win over the gatekeepers, right? Wrong. There were still a lot of charges against them of, above all things, not being real metal. 3 days before that Alternative Press Music Awards were to happen, I was able to get the tickets and see them play at the Wiltern in Los Angeles. July of 2016 there was. I still only knew Gimme Chocolate, so it was impossible for me to really get into the concert as much as I should have without knowing such bangers as Megitsune or Headbanger or Road to Resistance or Karate or some of the other really good Babymetal songs. I still at that point had only known Gimme Chocolate. Now to get to some reasons why I'm spending so much time talking about Babymetal. First of all, I want to talk about my responses to seeing them play in 2016. As an adult at this point who was the founder and executive director of his own nonprofit event, when I look back now at the social media posts that I made from the show or right after the show, there are some things that I notice in hindsight. So first of all, there's this picture of me and 2 people I went with, no names, but again, I'll blur out the faces for their privacy. But of course, 3 dudes, 3 adult dudes, and it has the caption, quote, "I don't know, are we tough enough for Babymetal?" So as much as that is certainly a joke post I made, there seems to be some implication that we are seeing something fluffy and are feeling a little challenged to our insecurities as being adult men going to see a concert performed by 3 teenage girls. Then there's this other post. It is my reaction. I made a pic stitch of some of the pictures I took at the Wiltern when I saw them play, and here is my commentary. Quote, "Oh wow, what can I say about the unique experience known as Babymetal? 2 identity-forming styles that traditionally repel one another. Saccharine, uber-catchy J-pop, backed by some brutal and blistering speed metal. It works precisely because no one would expect it to. Prefab? Definitely. Too old to care. Effing awesome? Also definitely. I am a fan." So I want to take that mini review and break it down for a second. A lot of my life in punk rock has clearly gone into that post without my intention, but I will start from the top. So number 1, where I say, I acknowledge that Babymetal is a unique experience. So many people I talk to in the arts world, whether film, music, or what have you, love to talk about originality. But when something original does happen and it challenges expectations, the first reactions are bad ones because people do like the expected and tend to not like something wholly original, even if they say they do. But I acknowledge that Babymetal was very original and unique. We do have metal with full choreography, and anyone who says you cannot dance to metal, just watch Babymetal and you will be proven wrong. Next on this comment, number 2, I refer to both J-pop and metal as quote-unquote identity-forming styles. That indicates almost a decade ago that I was thinking of these things in almost religious terms, just like I'm doing for this episode. And I find that fascinating. I acknowledge that your whole identity goes into these subcultural things. Number 3, here's something I'm a little angry at myself for. I refer to J-pop as catchy, but also as quote-unquote saccharine, which I think denotes at least some level of condescension on my part. Number 4, and this is probably the most important, that last part of my comment where I say prefab, definitely, effing awesome, also definitely, I am a fan. It is a simple statement, but it has a lot going on there. I had come to understand by that point that Babymetal was put together by an idol company, Amuse Incorporated, and by an idol school called Sakura Gakuen. And a lot of their background is a sort of performance art. And they have a cadre of producers led by Koba Metal. They have writers who write songs. They have a choreographer who does their choreography, and a lot of other artists behind them. And the 3 leads in Babymetal basically execute that, which takes an enormous amount of talent and hard work on their part. And although I would have poo-pooed that in the past, I have a full acknowledgement of that now. In fact, more than acknowledgement, I am in awe of the work that it takes for just those 3, for Su Metal, Moa Metal, and now Momo Metal, to not only sing and perform, but remember choreography for each song and actually put that out there on stage with such precision and to be so entertaining and really interactive with their crowds. That being said, my life in punk rock was something I have internalized. And part of that was to view this as inauthentic even then. I had tempered it down with nicer language. I had, instead of saying fake or poser or even inauthentic, I used the term prefab or prefabricated. And what's interesting to me about that is I was genuinely blown away by the performance when I saw it, standing there and just like hearing it. Even though I only knew one song, it was enough to experience the energy, the dance moves, everything about it. It was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And that's why I said I was a fan at the end. I was being sincere there, but I clearly also felt the need to admit that with a caveat. I had to acknowledge that it was prefab as an excuse, as a sign of how hard it is to break away from the gospel that one is raised with. In my case, the gospel that anything at all done outside the confines of some kids playing in their basement is somehow less real. What I was saying there is that I liked their performance even though it was prefab. And it was crazy to say that at that point, because my entire life at that point was built around film festival life. It was built around spotlighting films, and filmmaking at its very core is created by exactly what I was accusing Babymetal of being. It's built by a group of collaboratively working artists. Each artist brings their own skill set to the table, whether they are production designer, composer, actor, director, and they all work together in the service of the art, in the service of the final piece, the final presentation, the final performance. And from one denomination on to the next denomination, yet the rules of one still trying to worm their way into my brain. the rules of my old school DIY, lo-fi way of thinking, still trying to get me to not really admit that I loved Babymetal whole cloth. I had to say, you know what? I do know they're prefab, but I like them anyway. Again, it's not harmful, really, but it is a little bit sad just because I didn't go and seek it out. I made that post on July of 2016, July 15th of 2016. You could see from the Facebook post. And I was way too busy with festival prep to catch 3 days later the performance on the Alternative Music Video Awards with Rob Halford. I didn't see that until many years later on YouTube. And it was the last time that I really actively listened to anything Babymetal. I still only knew Gimme Chocolate at that point. For that reason, the next time I even heard the name Babymetal that I can remember in my head was a couple of years later, maybe a year and a half later in January of 2018. And that was a sad bit of news when the guitarist of their Eastern Kami band who plays with their live shows, Mikio Fujioka, he had died from injuries that he sustained from a fall he took in December, maybe a few days earlier. He had been stargazing from an observation deck and ended up falling, and it killed him. And so there was some news about that. And now I feel incredibly sad about that. At the time, I felt sad about it too. So someone died. It's very sad. But wow, when news came out about that, I said, oh, this is terrible. I saw them. They were great, but it still didn't drive me to listen to their music more. And I look back now at those crappy pictures I took and made a pic stitch of, here it is again, that I took from the show that I saw in Los Angeles at the Wiltern. And I can see that I indeed have images of Fujioka-san playing live that I actually saw Mikio play. And the guy was absolutely superhuman. I wish I had acknowledged it or been able to appreciate it more. And there he is right there in those pictures. And wow, isn't that a religious thought when I say that guy is absolutely superhuman? It's a religious thought. It's a superhuman, supernatural thought. So it's so easy to slip into theistic feelings for artists who fill up the darkness of our souls, another religious thought, with light. And perhaps that's why I wanted to end this episode by talking at length here about Babymetal, which I'm sure still has a lot of you sitting at home being like, why are you spending so much time about Babymetal? And I think the reason is that I have spent some time away from any subcultural denomination, and Babymetal has come to fill that void. So let's see why. In 2022, I spent almost that entire year in extremely dark places. That year was defined by nervous breakdowns, severe depression, anhedonia, suicidal ideation. That year was when I officially killed my film festival and uprooted my family, moved us all from San Diego to the colds of New England. And I spent this time that we've been in New England desperately trying to claw my way out of this pit, this mental pit, this terrible mental health that I'm still struggling with. And it is in that hole, the hole of darkness, that I rediscovered Babymetal. So I will say I do not know what clicked for me this time. I don't know what worked for me that didn't work before. Perhaps I just had the time now. I wasn't doing a film festival. I was doing art and I was listening to music as I did art. Perhaps I was in the mental state that primed me for really being affected by their music. And in any case, I discovered that I could see beyond what so many people tend to call a gimmick when they only cursorily know Babymetal. They say it's a gimmick or a novelty, but I was suddenly able to see beyond that to something in the center that I really connected with, something beautiful. And also, just as an aside, generally speaking, novelties and gimmicks don't last almost a generation. Babymetal's been playing now for 15 years? I think they've gone beyond being called a gimmick, but I digress. I rediscovered them. They had recently put out a fourth album called The Other One. And the three main performers, I could now name them. Lead vocalist was known as Su Metal, or Suzuka Nakamoto. And there were two dancers that normally were with them. Yui at that point had left the band earlier, I think 2017. And they spent some time with backup dancers until they found a new one. But Moa Metal, who is Moa Kukuchi, had been there the whole time. The third, Momoko Okazaki, or Momo Metal, joined officially. What made it, I will admit, part of what made it comfortable for me to like them was they were now adults, right? It was that feeling of being an old man watching a teenage performer. However unfair it is to feel that way, that was gone. They're now in their 20s. Suzuka's like almost 28 or 27 or something, so she's approaching 30s. And that just feels a little more comfortable. And not only are they older, they're more seasoned as performers. Suzuka's voice is richer and grander with greater control over their art than I feel like they previously had, even though I think they were always amazing. Suzuka's leadership air, she held audiences in the palms of her hand when she was 15. Now, when she's 27, she has it down. And if anyone wants to hear about the maturity of her voice, which has a pretty deep emotional effect on me that I can't understand. I don't want to go into religious terms, but when I hear her sing and I feel the shivers up my spine and the tears start to form in my eyes, I can't understand exactly why that is, nor do I really care to understand it. I just know that those sounds organized in time, in the way that she presents them, have that emotional effect on me, and that's all I need to know. And for anyone who wants to hear her sing in a very raw way, I will link their performance of Monochrome on the First Take, which is really unplugged, if you will, version of that song. And her singing is remarkable. So I do want to admit, when I knew I was going to talk about this and it was going to be a big part of this episode, I felt I still feel embarrassed. I feel a little silly just by realizing that listening to Babymetal and watching their old videos and catching up on the lore of that band, it's been helping me piece together my shattered mental state. And on some level, that feels ridiculous. And on a huge level, I know most people will not get it, think it's, something to make fun of me for. Reddit has turned out to be a bit of a help to bring Reddit up again. Here are some threads or things said on Reddit, on the Babymetal subreddit. I'm going to withhold names, of course, but I could frankly go in there and say the same thing myself. Here's one. I started listening to them around 2017, around the time my mental health was not going great, and I was at my lowest point. While I was listening to their albums one day, I realized that it was the songs making my mood better. Another thing, I discovered Babymetal during one of the most challenging times of my life. Their energetic music and captivating performances were like a ray of sunshine cutting through the darkness. Whenever I felt low, I'd throw on one of their albums or watch their Blu-rays, and instantly, all my worries would melt away. Here's another one. Babymetal has been the only thing to somehow get me through my depression. Short, to the point, and yes. It goes on and on. I admit that this has all been helpful to me to read this and connect with people with these similar experiences. It has felt like the beginnings of what could entrap people into a dogma or a religious-like subculture. And just a couple of days ago, maybe 4 days ago, I came across this Reddit post. It got me thinking, especially since I knew I was going to do this episode. This poster shared how their religious parents would not allow them to go see a Babymetal show. Now, for this person, Babymetal was a way to feel understood and escape the rigid world their parents imposed on them. And of course, a lot of people in the comments offered their advice. And here's the kicker. This person was 20 years old. I don't giggle there to make fun of this person, by the way. It's just, that seems old and it's shocking, right? It feels shocking. And I do feel for the struggle there, but I acknowledge everybody has different experiences and very much no judgment. And to be fair, from the posts, nobody was judging this person, although there were some comments of, hey, you're 20, do what you want. And I think for a lot of people, that's not so easy. But I think that post did hit me as a different kind of intersection of fundamentalist religion and pop music. And I think more people are familiar with that intersection. If you are familiar with the PMRC back in the 80s, or heavy metal records being lit on fire, and a lot of the court hearings that were being held about First Amendment rights for music and all of that craziness. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then look up PMRC, and you'll learn a lot about some of the things that I remember going through and growing up with. If you're unfamiliar, it's fascinating history and recent history, I would say fairly recent history in the US. But I wonder still if Reddit is the best place for that 20-year-old to seek out advice on this whole topic. I hope they are or are allowed to see a therapist and address this with a professional. And for anyone wondering, is it mental health to have an argument with your parents about going to a therapy is not just about mental health. It's great for mental health, but ultimately it's to get a professional and third-party disinterested outlook, to get another opinion and to help you clear your own head and see stuff from a different perspective. I'm a big advocate of therapy, especially now. Yeah, I hope that this person's able to do that and not just use Reddit for that. If you've ever been part of a subculture like this, a niche identity building subculture, any kind of tight-knit community like this, you might know yourself how deeply personal it can get. It's not just entertainment. I think for a lot of people, movies and music are entertainment. They're a time killer. They might feel stuff from it and then it's over. It's something to happen as you drive to work or drive to the library or the grocery store. But for a lot of people, for me to call it a subculture, it goes beyond that. It's your identity. It's who you are. It's how you dress. So now that I'm close to my 50s, I am at a point where I feel suspicious of too many didactic leanings of these communities, whether they're secular like a subculture or religious especially, of too many gospel rules, right? Too many things of when someone says that's not real metal, that sounds to me like gospel truth, which I find to be truth according to who. So I'm really trying to be more suspicious of hero worship. And so what do I do when I have this baby metal, which I feel like has done a lot for my mental health? And for that reason, my heart is drawn to them in ways that could be thought of as these subcultural gospel leanings. So what I'm learning to do is to add some pragmatism to the things in which I find inspiration. When it comes to baby metal, beyond the reaction to their sounds organized in time and the energy of their performances and the things that I love on a surface level, I actively focus on gaining inspiration from their perseverance as artists. So here's how I'm going to end this, my conclusion. I want to talk about that perseverance and I'm going to talk about it in a way that will give you an example of how I'm deciding to love artists. Let's go back. Before the Rob Zombie incident in 2016, we're going to go back to 2014. It was going to be their first international appearance. They had started in Japan, of course. They started in 2010, but now it's 2014, 4 years later, and they're about to hit the road internationally. And this one performance was going to be Sonosphere in the UK in the summer of 2014. It is a pretty big heavy metal and rock festival and had an audience of about 50,000 people. And that might seem huge for a first international festival, but this is the time that Gimme Chocolate went viral. So it makes sense. They had initially been part of the side stage act, and couple of months before the show, it was announced that they were going to be a main stage featured act. I believe they went on right before Ghost, which is another kind of genre-defying metal band that a lot of people like. That promotion from side stage to main stage, that issue with this strange act from Japan being on the main stage at a huge festival like Sonosphere, it got the ire of some of the gatekeeper metalheads. So I do want to say, of course, it's not just baby metal. Metalheads have historically been protective, I will say, of their genre. They've rejected any band or artist that didn't fit into a narrow definition of some kind of subgenre of real metal, quote unquote, that term. And you'll see the same kind of vitriol aimed at all kinds of bands that are more experimental or want to challenge conventions or bring in elements from other genres or what have you. And so those gatekeepers are always going to be there. So I wanted to acknowledge that. But what makes this different for me, what pisses me off, I'll just say, is that the recipients of the vitriol, the recipients of the online abuse and bullying were teenagers. They were kids, children. I think Suzuka was 17 maybe, and the other two are a couple of years younger. I didn't know anything about the world when I was a teenager that young. These kids, these 3 kids, were no doubt facing this first international performance with tens of thousands of metalheads. And I am pretty convinced that they saw at least some of what was being said about them online. I'm pretty convinced that they saw some of the vitriol, and it was a range from people booing and just saying mean things all the way through to threats, like we're going to throw bottles of piss at them when they get on stage. And that last one really gets to me, the idiocy of threatening to toss piss bottles at anyone on stage is just stupid. But to threaten that at 3 teenagers from another country who don't speak your language and say we're going to throw bottles of piss at them, that is enraging. That makes me really angry. But here's where things get interesting. Babymetal faced all this hate, the gatekeeping, and you know what? They broke through. They not only did they survive and perform and get through the end, but they thrived. Like now looking back, that festival show at Sonosphere 2014 where Babymetal performed, it is a history-turning moment for them. They won over a lot of the metalheads who hated them, or at least said they did. But more importantly, that was an audience of metal fans and rock fans, and a lot of them didn't even know who they were. This is early in their career, and all they saw was this Japanese band headed by 3 choreographed dancing teenage girls, and were probably pretty confused about what was going on. But by the time the last song ended, the audience was erupting with cheers and applause and asking them to play one more song. And it was a real moment of triumph. And that's inspirational to me. Can you imagine being a teenager and flooring that many people just by doing what you want to do? It took me several years to understand what standing on that stage there what kind of courage that must have taken to face down the mob and win. So years later, in 2024, and this is right when I'm in the middle of trying to climb out of my own mental health anguish and just rediscovering this band and looking over their old performances and old interviews and whatnot. In 2024, there was an interview with the whole band. And the lead singer, Suzuka Nakamoto, must have thought about that Sonosphere show and maybe the whole atmosphere around them at the time when she was asked to give advice to women who have dreams of entering the metal world. This interview took place at Nova Rock Festival in 2024, I believe by Barracuda Music Podcast. And for me, it's a magic moment because Babymetal interviews tend to be quite short. They tend to either be in Japanese with an interpreter, or more recently, the 3 women in Babymetal tend to speak English and have been gradually improving in their English over the years. But they're also a bit mysterious. They're clearly under the guide of their producer and their manager. And so they often seem a little prefab, right? But this one is the most candid I have seen Sue Metal give. She gives the answer in English, and just watch.
Something that really stands out is that metal is usually perceived as a very male-dominated genre. So you 3, as a female-fronted band, of course, are bringing something unique to the table in that regard. Is there any special experience when it comes to that? And how does it feel? How would you describe it to young female artists growing up? And do you have any tips for them?
Like everything in life, there are challenges at first. When we first started, so like not everyone understood us. But when we continue to do what we want to do, when we started hearing like a positive feedback from metal fans.
Yeah.
As you know, the metal fans are big critics.
Yeah.
So it is not easy for us.
Okay.
But when they started enjoying our music and concerts, it means the world to us.
Absolutely.
So I want to say, don't get disheartened by criticism. Just do what you want to do. Don't give up.
Beautiful. Thank you.
For me, I get some inspiration that is rooted in something identifiable here. It shows me how someone so young can persevere in the face of grand challenges, and that maybe I can persevere too. No dogma required. If I feel that silly embarrassment about admitting that part of my mental health journey is involving this band from Japan, one of the cures to that is this very pragmatic bit of inspiration rooted in something that I can very directly apply to my life. And I feel okay about that. And I also feel okay that this is not another run towards something dogmatic about subculture or a subcultural religion. It's just something good, something that I can feel happy about. And it's a dark enough world that's good enough for me.